Alright, so in today's video we're taking a look at a new night vision FPV camera. This is a camera made by AxisFlying and it's called the Owl Pro. Now I don't actually really know a whole lot about this camera other than it's a analog night vision camera made by AxisFlying. The only reason I even know about this camera is because quite a few of you guys actually messaged me, asked me to do a review of it, so here we are. Here's me doing a review of it. So yeah, let's just have a quick look at the box. There's nothing on the box other than it just says AxisFlying on the top. Let's break the seal on the bottom and just very quickly see what we get inside. That's the seal broken. Let's take the top off. So the first thing we see is a little instruction leaflet. I say instruction leaflet, actually this is more of just a spec sheet. It just covers the basic specs. Owl Blacklight Pro, analog FPV camera, sensor type 1/1.8 inches, minimum illumination 0.00001 lux. Says it's got a day and a night mode built in, so it'll do either color or black and white. Frame rate 1080p at 60 frames per second, focal length 3.3 millimeters, aperture of 1.0. Yeah, all fairly standard stuff. There's nothing in those specs that's really standing out to me as being amazing. I'm not expecting this camera to be sort of anything phenomenal, but obviously we will see. So let's see what we now get in the box as well. Little sleeve here. So this has got a basic little wiring loom, just a free wired wiring loom. Obviously because this is an analog FPV camera, so this just has a power ground and video signal wire. We'll look at the camera in a sec. I'll just see under here, there's a little sleeve there. There's a little bag here. This just has some screws and a little Allen key. Nothing sort of particularly exciting there. Let's now have a look at the most important bit. This is the camera. And yeah, this is a fairly sort of standard size FPV camera. The only thing that's really interesting to note about this is just the fact that the lens, this sort of like shroud around the lens, it's more of a square shape than a round shape. I don't know if there's any sort of specific reason for that. Like I said, this camera is supposed to be a blacklight technology camera. Don't actually have a clue what blacklight technology means. I don't know whether that sort of has any influence over the shape of this lens or whether this is just an aesthetic choice. But yeah, there's not really much to say about this camera. It's got a metal body. On the back, you've just got the plug there for that little wiring loom, and it says Owl Pro on the back. Yeah, not really much to say about this. Standard size sort of FPV camera, standard sort of weight. So let's now get this installed into something and actually go test it out, because that's obviously the most important thing about this. We want to see, is this camera any good at being used in the dark or in the daytime? We want to just test it out and see if it's any good. Let's do a jump screen and see what this camera is actually like to use. Okay, so it seems to have become a bit of a tradition that when I test night vision FPV cameras, I start off my reviews by installing the cameras onto a pair of my FPV goggles to basically make myself a pair of night vision goggles. And that's exactly what I've done here. So these are my SkyZone Cobra X V2 analog FPV goggles. And you'll see here on the top, I've very professionally installed the AxisFlying Owl Pro camera up here, and I've wired it directly into the goggles to basically make my own pair of night vision goggles. Now, as you'll see, I'm out in the field and I'm ready to do some testing. Although the keen observers amongst you will notice that it's not nighttime, it's still the middle of the day. And the reason for that is because the Owl Pro camera is supposed to be a daytime use camera as well as a nighttime use camera. So I figured we'll start off the review by just seeing what it's like to use during the day. So I've got the goggles powered on, I've got the DVR enabled, so I'm going to put them to my face and I'm going to show you what it is I can see. So at the moment, this is supposed to be a colour image, although I'm not seeing a whole lot of colour. This tree here, I would say it's got a little bit of a pinkish tinge to it, but mostly the image looks quite desaturated, maybe almost a little bit sepia, certainly to my eyes in the goggles here. But the most obvious thing that I'm noticing is that the image is very, very overexposed. Looking down at the grass here, I can't see anything. There's a couple of distant goalposts in the distance there. Look at this, I've got my hand in front of the camera, you can barely see that as well. Really not managing to see very much at all. And that is very much because this camera is so sensitive to light. It's designed to take a very, very weak light source and magnify it a lot. But it does seem to mean that when you use it during the daytime, especially on a nice bright sunny day like this, it's just taking that sunlight and it's massively magnifying it, and it's overexposing everything. So basically the conclusion that you can make is that this camera absolutely cannot be used during the daytime, especially on a nice bright sunny day like this. But I do wonder what it'd be like to use sort of maybe during the sort of the twilight hours when it's starting to get a little bit darker. So let's use the magic of camera trickery to fast forward in time and have a look and see what that's like now. Right, so it's about 5 hours later, the sun has just set, and hopefully you'll be able to tell that it's a little bit dimmer than it was before. It's not the intense bright sunlight we had earlier. We're now sort of coming into the beginning of that sort of like twilight phase. So let's now have a look and see what the Owl Pro is like now that the light levels are a little bit lower. So as you can see, we now have a much more usable image. The colours are still a little bit weird. I mean, this tree that I'm looking at up here is sort of looking a bit of a sort of a reddish brown kind of colour, and the ground, there's a little bit of green in it, but it's still, I wouldn't really say this was a colour image. It's sort of monochrome. It's not exactly a vibrant, colourful image. The colours definitely aren't accurate. Looking at this building here, the building's there, the colour there is a little bit more accurate, and like this bin here, that's more accurate colour. And this red car, it's a bit more accurate, but yeah, certainly looking at the grass and looking at the trees here, the colours of those are all very, very strange. But the important thing is though, is that this is a usable image. You know, you could fly your drone with this image. The colours are a little bit weird, but it is totally usable. So the takeaway from this is that the Owl Pro, you definitely can't use it in very, very bright sunlight, but you can certainly use it at this time of day, sort of sunset, sort of the twilight period. And I reckon you'd be absolutely fine to use it if it was like an overcast day where it was quite cloudy. Now obviously what we really want to know is what is the Owl Pro like to use when it's actually properly dark, because that is very much what this camera is designed for. So let's do another jump cut. We'll travel forward in time another sort of 2 or 3 hours to when it's sort of completely dark, and then we'll see what this camera is truly capable of. Let's go. Okay, so as you can see, it is now dark, or should I say now as you can't see. Let me get my phone torch out so you can actually kind of see me. Yeah, as I was saying, it's now dark. Sunset was sort of about 2 hours ago, I think. So it's now about as dark as it's going to get. I'm still in the same location, I'm still in this field, but it is completely pitch black. So that means that we can now give the Owl Pro a proper little testing. So I've got the DVR started on my goggles, put my phone in my pocket, put the goggles to my face, and let's have a look and see what we can see. And oh my God, look at that. That is actually a lot better than I expected. That's actually really quite impressive. The location I'm in, hopefully it'll come across on the GoPro, but it's pretty dark here. There is a path in the distance over there that runs around the edge of the field. It's got a couple of street lights on, but that's pretty much the only light source that is here. So I'm going over here. So there's a couple of houses here that got the lights on, but it's all really quite dark. But yeah, look at this, look at the field. I mean, I can clearly make out the ground, I can make out the trees, I can make out details in the trees. Make some details in the clouds as well. This is really actually quite impressive. Make out a goalpost there as well. And there should be a couple more goalposts over here. I will admit I am struggling to see them. I can see the one down at the very end of the field there actually. Yeah, this is actually working a lot better than I was expecting. I just realised you can also see a couple of stars up there in the sky as well. That's very cool. Now one thing that you're going to notice straight away is that this is now a black and white image. And this tends to be fairly sort of standard with night vision FPV cameras, or night vision cameras in general, is that, you know, to get a good night vision image, you do tend to have to sacrifice colour. But yeah, this is, I'm impressed with this. This is actually working pretty well. You know, I can clearly make out sort of like these posts here, see my hand, see my feet. You could fly with this, right? I reckon you'd have no problem flying with this at all. You know, if you're sort of like your usual sort of like flying location was like a park or something with a little bit of ambient lighting in the distance, I don't think you'd have any problem flying with this in the slightest. You know, like looking at that goalpost there, you know, if you imagine that goalpost was a gate and you're trying to get a race quad for it, no problem seeing that. Yeah, I'm actually impressed with this. I didn't think that this would actually work as well as it would. This is actually somewhat comparable to the Caddx Infra. I'm actually quite impressed. What I want to know now though, like I said, this location has actually got, you know, a few lights around. I want to know what this is like in a really, really dark location. I reckon we should head to the woods. Okay, so I've got no idea whether you're going to see this or not, but I'm now in the middle of the woods. I'll try and use my phone torch to illuminate a little bit. Yeah, you can't see any of that on there, can you? Yeah, I am very much in the woods on the far outside of the city. It is pitch black here. I can't see a single thing other than I can just about make out the sky through some of the trees above me. Sorry, I'm pointing up there. I can just about make it the sky, but yeah, it is basically pitch black here. This is a proper dark location. So let's now see what the Owl Pro can see. There is no illumination here whatsoever, other than probably the glow coming off of my GoPro here. So let's turn the DVR on and let's have a little look. So I can see something. I'm not going to lie, I can't see a lot, but I can see something. Certainly when I look up at the sky looks very, very bright. And actually, look at that, you can see my arm. Wow, you can even see my tattoo. Okay, I'm actually quite impressed with that. Yeah, you can see my arm, you can see my tattoo. I can make out the trees. Like I said, the sky is appearing very, very bright, which to my eye is not, basically. I can make out the trees here. Like I said, I'm in a little car park. I can make out a star up there as well. I'm in a car park, so look at my car. Yeah, there's my GoPro. Like I said, that's producing a little bit of light, and that's the only light source here. Well, admittedly, I do have the engine running, my car running, so the dashboard lights are on, but I'll just show you the headlights aren't on or anything like that. It is pitch black here. But yeah, you can see my car pretty well here. I can actually see quite a lot. Like I say, I can make out the trees and sort of stuff. The only thing I'd say that I can't see, really, is the ground. I can just about make it out. I can just about make out the edge of the car park here. There's sort of the grass and the shrubs, and I can just about make out the car park, but certainly towards the end of the car park, I can sort of make it out, but yeah, not very clear. But this is still actually really quite impressive. This is working way better than I expected. You know, this is a camera which, you know, costs half of what the Caddx Infra costs. And yeah, I'd say that the performance of this is actually pretty close. Honestly, I can't stress enough to you how much of a dark location this is. I can't believe you can see my hand. I'm actually really impressed to see my hand. What if I turn the camera around? Can you see me? Hi. I've got no idea if you can see me. I won't know until I look back at the DVR later. But yeah, this is actually really quite impressive. I should point out, I don't think I've mentioned this yet in this video, I bought this camera with my own money. This isn't a sponsored review or anything. If this camera is rubbish, I would say so, because I'm under no obligation to say otherwise. But yeah, I'm actually generally really quite impressed with this. This is working a lot better than I thought it was going to. Now obviously the Owl Pro is a FPV camera, so it makes sense that the next thing that I do is actually use it as an FPV camera and actually put it on a drone, take it up in the air and see what it's actually like to use as a FPV camera. And that's exactly what I'm about to do now. So I've currently come to a nice dark park. It's about 1 o'clock in the morning. It's pretty dark here, I'm not going to lie. It's also quite cloudy. And over here on the ground, this is my Holybro X500 V2 multi-rotor, and down here, hopefully you can see it on the little gimbal here, there is the AxisFlying Owl Pro. So the aircraft is all set up and ready to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my camera just down here, and I'm going to take it up for a quick little flight and see what it's like. Okay, so let's arm the aircraft. Always seems to take a second for the motor to actually start spinning, but there we go. And let's throttle her up. Get her up into the air. Now as I'm climbing, I'm just going to move her forwards a little bit because I don't want it to be directly on top of me here. Get a little bit of distance. Climb up a little bit higher. Go up to an altitude of, I reckon, about sort of 20 meters. Let's turn around as we do this. Aim the camera down. And you can see me down there. So there we are, that's 23 meters, I'll do. So put it into a hover there, and we'll have a little bit of a look around. So yeah, you can see me there. I'll give you a little bit of a wave. It looks like I'm really heavily illuminated, but the only thing that's illuminating me at the moment is the FPV screen I'm using to fly, and a little bit of light coming off my radio. And behind me, just up here, there is a little footpath with a couple of streetlights on. They're actually quite dim street lights, but as you can see on here, they look very, very bright. The Owl Pro, as I sort of mentioned earlier on, it's a bit like the Caddx Infra. It can take a fairly dim light source, and then it will magnify it and it'll make it look very, very bright. So yeah, as I said, looking in this direction, we are looking towards a streetlit path that sort of runs the perimeter of the field. But let's look into the middle of the field, because that's where it's very, very dark. Hopefully you can sort of see on the GoPro footage how dark it is. To the eye, I can't make out very much at all. So just to the side here, there's this big oak tree. So to my eye, all I can see is kind of the silhouette against that. Sorry, the silhouette of that against the sky. But on here though, the Owl Pro is doing an absolutely fantastic job. I can actually make out a lot of detail in the tree. I won't go as far as to say I can see individual leaves, but you can certainly sort of make out sort of different branches of the foliage there. And you can see this little path down here that's sort of winding through the field. And then looking off into the distance over here, so this is a kids' play park. I'm just looking with my eyes. I can't see that at all, not even in the slightest. Sorry, excuse my coughing there. Yeah, I can't see that in the slightest. So this is actually working very, very well. You know, I can clearly make out, you know, the boundary of the field all the way around. I can make out trees all the way around. I mean, looking down here, I can make out the goalposts. There's another goalpost over here somewhere, wasn't there? Yeah, down here. And this goalpost is very much sort of in the darkest part of the field. Let's look over into the distance. So in the far distance over there, that's a big industrial estate. And there are quite a lot of lights over there. I can't really see them with my eyes because they're behind buildings, but they are looking very, very bright. It looks like there's big floodlights over there, but I promise you that there isn't. Like I said, all that is over there is an industrial estate and there are some lights, but this camera is taking any light source and it's magnifying it a lot. So I mean, as we look over towards the city here as well, it looks very, very bright in the city, but that's just your standard city lights. I am very, very impressed with this though. I was not expecting this camera to be as good as it is. Let's have another look down there at me. That little light you can see on the floor just beside me, that is my FPV goggles. That's what I'm using to DVR this flight. And it's crazy how bright that looks because the screen on the FPV goggles is actually facing at the ground. So the light isn't even directly aiming up. But yeah, in comparison to the sort of the Caddx Infra, which I'd say is sort of the gold standard, like the best night vision FPV camera available at the moment, I would say this compares very, very well. It's not quite as good, but it is impressive. Also, you've got to kind of take my word for it how dark it is here, but yeah, this is able to see fantastic. You'd have no problem. I just noticed you can see the other goalpost there just above my crosshairs. Yeah, you'd have no problem flying like a race quad or, you know, a fixed wing sort of around this field at the moment using this camera. Yeah, I'm very, very impressed. It's able to make a lot of detail. Like I said, that path there, no problem seeing that. A couple of little trees, you can see them absolutely fine as well. And yeah, that distant play park, I can make out various of the items in the play park. I can see the little climbing frame there. I can see the roundabout. I can see the swings. Yeah, very, very impressive. Now, I know that someone at least out there is going to ask, well, what is this directly like in comparison to the Caddx Infra? So the X500 I'm flying at the moment actually has two cameras on board. It's got the Owl Pro and it's also got the Caddx Infra. And using a switch on my radio, I can switch between the two cameras. Now, the only problem is that the Caddx Infra is a PAL format camera and the AxisFlying Owl is an NTSC format camera. What that means is that when I switch, it's going to glitch quite a lot and it's going to mess up the DVR recording. So I don't want to do it loads, but I'm going to do it for you just one time now. I'm going to switch to the Infra and it will kind of mess up for a second. And I've got a black image. I've got no idea why I've got a black image. Okay. Yeah, for some reason the Caddx Infra isn't working. All right, well, I'll have to show you that a little bit later on. There's always something goes wrong when you're trying to do reviews. But I will show you at the end of this flight a comparison between footage recorded with the Owl Pro at the moment, looking around, and I'll also show you some footage recorded with the Caddx Infra. But yeah, at the moment, very, very impressed with this. You know, for a camera which costs, you know, only $50, you know, more than half the price of the Caddx Infra, I think the performance is absolutely incredible. I was not expecting it to be this good. I've used a lot of sort of night vision FPV cameras over the years, and I would say this is probably the second best one that I've ever used. I'm very, very impressed. Anyway, I want to land the aircraft. I want to see if I can figure out why the Caddx Infra isn't working, and then hopefully I'll record a little bit of footage with the Caddx Infra for you to have a look at in comparison to the Owl here. Let's bring the aircraft down, bring it forward a little bit, so I've got to walk for miles. And there we go. Let's pitch the camera back up. And we're on the ground.
Disarmed.
Disarmed. Okay, so as promised, just after I did that flight that I just showed you, I then did a second flight where I recorded some footage using the Caddx Infra night vision FPV camera, so I could then show you a comparison between the two cameras. And I'll put that footage on screen for you now. And straight away, you're going to see that the Caddx Infra is, it's a superior camera. And that's not surprising. It's a more expensive camera. So you're going to expect sort of the quality to be better. As you look at sort of the play park here, you can clearly sort of make out details much better. As we sort of look at this little housing estate on the edge of the park there. I mean, again, like the image, it's better, it's sharper, there's more sort of details. And crucially, there is a lot more contrast. And this is an interesting thing that I need to talk to you about. So when I was flying that flight last night, I was using this FPV screen that I've got attached to my radio. Now, ironically, in a previous video, I complained about this screen being quite contrasty and not producing a very sort of nice image. But actually, when I was flying last night, I thought that the image from the Owl Pro looked very, very good. But it's only sort of today when I've actually looked back at the DVR footage and I've seen what you've just seen, that the image directly from the camera is actually quite sort of like faded. It's lacking contrast. Obviously, I wasn't aware of that last night when I was doing the flight, and to me the image looked very, very nice. So it's interesting to sort of see that actually with a bit of contrast adjustment to the footage from the Owl Pro, the footage can look a lot nicer. And actually that is something that I've experimented with here in post-editing. I just sort of tweaked the contrast of the footage from the Owl Pro, and I think you'll agree, it looks a lot better. That is sort of like a major failing, I think, of the Owl Pro, is that just the contrast is way too low, and AxisFlying, they need to boost it up. Now, in a lot of sort of analog FPV cameras, you can plug in a little OSD programmer board, and then you can access a menu, and that will allow you to change a lot of things, such as brightness, contrast, sharpness, etc. And from what I've seen online, the original Owl by AxisFlying, that allowed you to do that. But annoyingly on the Owl Pro, they don't allow you to do that. I think they've missed an opportunity here, because if you could have plugged in a OSD programmer into the back of the Owl Pro camera, you could have then potentially tweaked some settings, maybe adjusted the contrast, and then you would have got a nicer image out of the Owl Pro that would look quite similar to the Caddx Infra. And this is, what I'm kind of seeing is that, like, I feel like the Owl Pro is ability to see in the dark. It isn't actually that far off what the Caddx Infra could see. When I was comparing the footage from both, I feel like the Owl Pro could see almost as much as the Caddx Infra, but just because the contrast is so low, the image just doesn't look so nice. Now, like I said, on my FPV screen, the image looked a lot better. So I think my recommendation to you would be that if you buy one of these Owl Pro cameras, one of the first things that you should do in your goggles, if you can do it, would be to adjust the contrast settings in your goggles to improve the image. Obviously, that won't make your sort of your DVR recording look any nicer. You'll have to tweak that, back at home with a video editor. But certainly for your flying experience, if you increase the contrast in your goggles, you're going to be able to see a lot more, and the footage you're going to see is going to be much more like the Caddx Infra. So yeah, that's just a major thing that I noticed, is that the contrast is very low. Now, talking about sort of the camera's lack of ability to do sort of programming on it, this is a thing that annoyed me, and I briefly mentioned it in that flight last night. It's the fact that the camera is locked into NTSC mode and you can't change it. Now, pretty much all of my other night vision FPV cameras are in PAL mode. And as I sort of mentioned in my video last night, like when you're using a camera switcher on a drone, you need both cameras to be the same. You need both cameras to be PAL or both cameras to be NTSC. Because my Caddx Infra and my thermal camera and my Gazer camera are all PAL cameras, I would have preferred it if the Owl Pro was also a PAL camera, but like I said, it's not, it's NTSC. It would be nice if they gave you the ability to switch between the two. It is weird because on the AxisFlying website, it says that the camera is capable of PAL or NTSC, but how? There's no way to change it. So that's something that does annoy me, you know, the fact that you can't change, you know, from NTSC to PAL. Now, one thing I just want to talk about is the lens on the camera. Well, there's two things about the lens I want to talk about. So firstly, I took a picture of this because you're not going to be able to see this, and I don't know how well it'll come out in the photo, but I did discover that on the very, very front of the lens, for some reason, there's like a very thin sort of like plastic film. I accidentally pressed my fingernail into it when I was first installing the camera. It's left a permanent dent. I don't know why they've done that. Why is the lens not made out of glass? I mean, maybe there's glass behind the plastic, but why is there this sort of soft, squishy plastic sort of lens cover on the camera lens? I don't know what that's all about, but it's something to be mindful of. You know, be careful if you get one of these, because it's very easy to, sort of, like I said, scratch or damage that little plastic bit on the front of the lens. As for this weird sort of like square lens hood, at the very beginning of the video I said like I wonder if there's anything special about that. Well, there's actually two screws on there, so I did take it off to have a look, and it turns out no, it's literally just a sort of like a thick plastic square lens hood. It doesn't seem to serve any purpose at all. I think it is literally just cosmetic. So anyway, this brings me to my conclusion. What do I think of the Owl Pro? Do I think it's a good camera? Yes, as you heard me say, I'm actually very impressed with it. Because of the fact that it's sort of quite cheap, sort of comparatively cheap to the Caddx Infra, I didn't have especially high expectations. But actually, I was very surprised. You know, the image that I got out of it, its ability to see in the dark, was actually very, very good. And, you know, I think as I mentioned earlier on, I think this is probably the second best night vision FPV camera I've ever used. Its ability to see in the dark was very, very impressive. It's just really annoying that, you know, the contrast is so low. I really wish that there's a way to boost that other than by tweaking sort of your goggle settings or your screen settings. That's its main sort of failing, I think. It's just the fact that the contrast is so low. But its ability to see in the dark is, you know, very good. And as I've already said, you know, if you're willing to sort of tweak some settings on your goggles, or if you want to tweak some settings, you know, post-editing, you can make the footage look much, much nicer and much more comparable to the Caddx Infra. Now, in terms of being able to use it in the daytime, as you saw on a bright sunny day, it just doesn't work at all. If you want to use it sort of like, you know, during twilight hours or maybe on like a really cloudy day, yeah, you could probably get away with that. But you know, the colors, because it hasn't got that infrared filter on it, the colors you get in the camera are very weird. You get lots of like pinky tones and stuff. If that doesn't bother you, then yeah, fine, use it during the day. But if it does, then yeah, this camera isn't really a daytime FPV camera. This is very much a nighttime, night vision FPV camera. And I'd say that if you're going to buy one of these, you probably want to sort of devote it to only using it for nighttime flying. So yeah, basically my conclusion is I quite like it. It's pretty impressive. I'd say it's probably the second best night vision FPV camera that I've used to date. Anyway, that is all I've got to say for today's video. But as always, if you've enjoyed watching it, please do give it a like. And I guess I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers, guys. Bye.